The Ages of the Zodiac, Magic, and You. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the various ages of the Zodiac and how their background energies can directly impact magical practice, and why this is important for you. Now, ages of the Zodiac aren't something in terms of magical practice that you're going to hear a lot about because, quite frankly, there isn't much of an historical record. You need to keep in mind that the great works of the classical Greek and Roman period, if you look at those from the standpoint of original source documents that we actually have access to, they basically fill a single bookshelf. The period of classical antiquity concerned with paganism largely consisted of the period of the Age of Aries. Now, under the Age of Aries, Aries was ruled by Mars and fire. Now, at the time of Christ's death, you basically have the beginning of the age of Pisces, which was ruled by, interestingly, both Jupiter and Neptune and water. And finally, depending upon who you ask, we are either at the end of the age of Pisces, or alternatively, at the beginning of the age of Aquarius, which is ruled by both Saturn and Uranus and governed by air. So this is kind of interesting because these background energies will definitely impact what magical effects a practitioner can engage in and perform. So if you go back to the classical pagan period and you read or learn about magical effects that were being engaged in, such as the battle between the Egyptian priest and Moses. It's easy to see in a world whose background energy is Mars, male sexuality, fire, and a near etheric kind of level of existence, ruled by Geburah, if you're into Sephiroth studies, by the way, how very near physical effects that would be visible to the eye would be easy to pull off, because there would simply be much more etheric energy available in the background at a near physical level. Now, as we go into the age of Aquarius, which is in turn ruled by Chesed, Jupiter, Neptune, and of course water, well, the things that you would be able to pull off would obviously change. This would probably appear or come across as a much more kind of higher level astral kind of thing, maybe, nearer to Tippereth in terms of the energies involved, and quite frankly have less of a purely physical character associated with it. Hence, the rise of what we call spirit magic or deity fusion, where you went less from working with these near physical elemental forces, and now you were more concerned with, say, merging your essence with another entity, such as a deity or a saint or a spirit of some kind. Well, we're coming to the end of the age of Pisces, and again, we're moving into this age of Aquarius. Depending upon who you ask, we may in fact already be there. Okay, the ruling planets for this are both Saturn and Uranus, and the element is air. So this would imply a more mental kind of level of existence, and in terms of magic, could quite possibly explain a lot of the, let's call it, psychic phenomena that have been coming up in popular culture and just in popular experience writ large that are more about observing and sensory apparatus type things and less about, say, setting a sheet of paper on fire with the power of your mind. So this is going to become important because when you consider the role of egregores, and this is a topic point of conversation on this channel, You also need to remember that egregores that are older, their magic would have developed in a time period where quite possibly this zodiac energy that is in the background governing things is different. That's also the reason why you can learn a magic from an older system, and it may not work in our time frame, or it may work differently. Now, to the degree that physics changes as a result of these background energies being different, it's really hard to say. But I would advise you to keep the following in mind. The trick with having a time machine isn't just that you need a time machine that works, it's also that you need a spaceship that works. Because our galaxy, while it's spinning in a circle and we're orbiting the center of that galaxy, is also, in fact, moving through space. So if you were to travel back, say, 8,000 years into the past, you would also need a spaceship that could take you to that point in space where the galaxy actually existed 8,000 years ago. So it's not a stretch to imagine that as the galaxy has moved, wherever it's moved from point A to point B, that the background energies governing that could very well have changed. And as a result, an age of Aries in one point in that celestial journey might actually be a little bit different than an age of Aries in a different point in that celestial journey. So I bring all of this up because many people who subscribe to this channel like to work with the magics of different classical systems. Keep in mind, depending upon how old that classical system is, the background energy available. Hey, everybody who's ever been interested in joining 60 Skills in person for some real-life instruction, all you Qigongers, meditators, yoga practitioners, and magicians out there can come join us at magiccamp.click, where you can learn all about our summertime in-person seminars. Otherwise, as per usual, train hard and be well. Otherwise, back to our regular programming. May or may not be what you need to actually make it work the way it did historically, or it may simply work differently now because of that. As any internal power magician will tell you, yes, as an internal power magician, we have the ability to generate any energy we want pretty much upon demand. But the part that gets left out on that is because your body is what's generating that, there's a tendency for the amount of energy being available to be, well, let's just call it rather discrete, which is a polite way of saying you don't really have that much of it. And I challenge anyone, and I've said this before, to generate fire element very strongly down by the seaboard in the middle of a raging storm. Yeah, I mean, you're going to get a little bit of something, but it's not going to be that much. So these background energies associated with the different ages we live in are, in fact, rather important. Now, a good question to be asked is, if I'm pulling on the power reservoir of a very old egregore, is this allowing me access to energies from essentially a different time period because they were stored at some point? It's a good question. I don't really know the answer to that, but that's something that an enterprising practitioner out there might be able to shed some light on. But the whole point of this discussion is, just because things worked a certain way at a certain point in time does not necessarily mean they work that way now. We already know for a fact that the value of karma is not static. It actually changes over time. That is an interesting discussion in its own right. But for those of you listening in today, I would encourage you to ponder how magic could simply have changed over the different ages based off of the energies that were available to be worked with. Hence this relationship between the zodiac, magic, and you. Otherwise, as per usual, train hard and be well.